darkness, my old friend. How come you talk with you again?
In 1964, two young men from New York, Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel, released a delicate, melancholic folk song called "The Sound of Silence." It flopped. Nobody listened. Nobody cared. Silence. But just 2 years later, something unbelievable happened. The song resurfaced, electrified, and reached #1 on the Billboard charts. Simon and Garfunkel became legends, pioneers of folk rock, writing some of the most poetic and haunting songs in music history. Fast forward over 50 years to 2015. Another band, one that couldn't be further from folk, takes the same song and does the unthinkable. Disturbed, a heavy metal band known for their aggression and intensity, covers "The Sound of Silence." And somehow, it explodes again. Why? Why did this song, written in a small apartment in the 1960s, resonate just as powerfully in the 21st century? This time through the raw, operatic power of David Draymond's voice? This is the story of Simon and Garfunkel versus Disturbed, the same song, two wildly different versions, and the timeless message that refused to be forgotten. Great songs do more than just sound good. They speak. "The Sound of Silence" isn't just another folk tune or a metal ballad. It's a cry of loneliness, isolation, and disconnection. When Simon and Garfunkel first wrote it, the world was grappling with the assassination of JFK, the Vietnam War. Young people felt alienated, disconnected from their leaders, from their country, even from each other. When Disturbed reimagined it, the world was struggling with something eerily similar, but on a global scale. The internet had connected people like never before. Social media made everyone louder, but nobody was truly listening. Simon and Garfunkel's version whispered the warning. Disturbed's version screamed it. But before we get into how a gentle folk duo from the 60s and an intense metal band from the 2000s ended up colliding over the same song, let's start at the beginning. Paul Simon, the architect of the song. The story of "The Sound of Silence" begins with one man, Paul Simon. In 1963, he was just a struggling songwriter, living in Queens, writing music nobody wanted to hear. One night, in the dim light of his parents' bathroom, he locked himself in, shut off the lights, and started writing. "Hello, darkness, my old friend." The words poured out, a poem about isolation, about people talking but never listening, about a world where real connection was slipping away. Simon brought it to his childhood friend and singing partner Art Garfunkel. With Garfunkel's angelic tenor voice, the two recorded a simple, stripped-down acoustic version for their debut album, Wednesday Morning, 3 a.m. The album bombed. Columbia Records quickly dropped the duo, and Simon left for England, defeated. He thought "The Sound of Silence" was dead. But something strange happened. Without Simon or Garfunkel knowing, radio stations started playing "The Sound of Silence." Then, in 1965, a Columbia Records producer remixed the song, adding electric guitars and drums, without Simon and Garfunkel's permission. And suddenly the song exploded. It climbed the Billboard Hot 100, reached #1, and turned Simon and Garfunkel into stars overnight. Their music became the voice of a generation. They went on to write some of the most legendary folk rock songs of all time: "Bridge Over Troubled Water," "Mrs. Robinson," "The Boxer." But despite their success, their partnership was turbulent. Egos clashed. Their friendship fractured. By 1970, Simon and Garfunkel broke up, leaving behind a catalog of songs that defined an era. And yet, "The Sound of Silence" never faded. Which brings us to 2015, when a band nobody expected would resurrect it once again. The evolution of Disturbed, from metal mayhem to emotional powerhouses. If Simon and Garfunkel were the poets of folk, then Disturbed was the battle cry of metal. Formed in 1994, Disturbed made their name through aggressive, high-energy songs, filled with fast riffs, primal screams, and pounding drums. Their breakthrough came with their 2000 album, The Sickness, featuring "Down with the Sickness," a song that became a staple of rock rebellion. For years, they were known for their intensity, their rage, their adrenaline-pumping music. So when they announced they were covering "The Sound of Silence," the reaction was, "Wait, what? A heavy metal band covering a delicate folk song?" It didn't make sense until they played it. and the world stopped. Disturbed's version, a darker, more haunting silence. Unlike the gentle, whispered version of Simon and Garfunkel, Disturbed's The Sound of Silence was epic, operatic, and thunderous. Instead of soft finger-picking, it opened with a lonely piano. Instead of a folk melody, it built into a storm of emotion. And then came David Dryman's voice. For the first minute, he sings almost in a whisper, vulnerable, restrained. But then the storm erupts. By the final chorus, Dryman unleashes a raw, powerful cry that shakes you to your core. When the last note fades, you're left breathless. The world agreed. The song reached #1 on the mainstream rock charts. The music video amassed over 900 million views. Even Paul Simon himself sent David Dryman a message, praising the cover as one of the best interpretations he had ever heard. How did this happen? Because Disturbed's version wasn't just a cover, it was a reinvention. It took the loneliness of the original and turned it into a desperate scream in the void, a sound for a generation drowning in noise, yet more disconnected than ever. What Simon and Garfunkel and Disturbed have in common? Despite their opposite sounds, Simon and Garfunkel and Disturbed had one thing in common. They understood the power of silence. Simon and Garfunkel's version spoke to a world on the brink of change, warning about alienation, war, and lost communication. Disturbed's version spoke to a world suffocated by technology, disconnected from reality, drowning in distractions. Both versions felt prophetic. Both versions left us haunted. And both versions proved one thing. Some songs don't belong to one era. They belong to all of us. What makes a song immortal? It's not just melody. It's not just lyrics. It's truth. In 1964, Simon and Garfunkel gave the world a whisper. In 2015, Disturbed gave it a roar. Both asked the same question. Are we really listening? The question remains, and in the echoes of silence, the answer is still waiting. But here's the real question for you. Which version spoke to you more? Was it Simon and Garfunkel's quiet, poetic sorrow? Or Disturbed's thundering, emotional outcry? And why do you think this song still resonates today, decades after it was first written? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk. Because if this song has taught us anything, it's that true connection starts when we stop just hearing and start listening.